I'm black, you're white.
Now what? So what if I say the wrong thing?
You probably will. Who doesn't? But I'll do my best to listen.
Maybe if we're humble enough to listen to each other,
Maybe if we're brave enough to lean into those difficult conversations.
we might
We could
come up with some answers,
make some real progress
discover how much we have in common.
and appreciate our differences.
Now you're talking.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us for another episode of I'm Black, You're White, Now What? I'm David Conley, communications consultant.
And I'm Chris Thurber, clinical psychologist.
Hey, Chris, how you doing?
I'm good. It's good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you. It's been a little while. I know both of us have been running, trying to do our best to save humanity. Save humanity.
I don't know, mixed results, but yeah.
Exactly.
Praise the effort, not the outcome.
Please do. But I thought it was, really a good time to, kind of circle back and get to just kind of talk about, a number of issues and things that are going on that are, great topics to talk about. What's been blowing my mind probably most recently are some of the images that are coming up about the Haitian immigrants that are trying, or I should say refugees at this point, because they haven't officially immigrated, but trying to cross the border, which is its own, complex issue. And I know I don't want to speak for you, but I know I'm not necessarily an expert on border policy and or what should be done with regard to the influx of people trying to get across the border and how that should be done. And it's a very complex issue, and I don't envy anybody who has to deal with it on the local, state, or federal level. But I was very, very, I guess the words would be struck, appalled, triggered by some of the images of people running, what would seem like in fear of their life, and folks chasing them down on horses with whips and the reins of their horses, whipping them and trying to grab them. And it was just like images that were very reminiscent of some dark times for race relations in America. And I just thought, man, whose idea was it to make this the standard operating procedure for the Border Patrol during this time? Who said, you know what we ought to do? And who's got horses? Let's get, and anybody got some of those whips? Let's get some of those out.
Make sure you're wearing the
see,
chaps with the fringe too to make it look authentic.
Right. And see what we can do about corralling some of these darker folks coming across. I just thought it was amazing to see images like that in 2021 in an official capacity. And I think that was the thing that was most disturbing to me. I know you saw some of the images and read some things about it. Tell me what you thought.
Yeah, no, and you absolutely can speak for me. I feel the same way. It's appalling. It's striking. And as you said just now, an image like that in 2021, when I was really hoping that, especially at the federal level and with the president and vice president that we currently have in office, a kind of social conscience would have taken hold enough that there would be different recourse. I mean, as you said, the issue of immigration is very complicated, and neither of us is an expert in that. So many layers, as you said before the show, above and below, but the inhumanity of those images transcends all of the complex context around immigration. Like, people are people are people. These people are hungry, tired, thirsty, sick, and looking for a home. Who would begrudge anyone of those basic needs? And whatever the immigrant, refugee, asylum pieces are part of this, it's just never okay
Mhm.
to whip a person,
Right. Right.
period.
Right.
And there may be Border Patrol agents who use horses to patrol miles and miles that would take them 10 times longer if they had to walk it themselves. And sometimes they're using ATVs, and sometimes they're using pickup trucks, and sometimes they're
Sure.
using horses, and like, fine. But where's the training that says when there's 15,000 people and they're under a bridge, however they got there, whatever cartels paid for the buses to go from the Guatemalan border with Mexico up to the Rio Grande, as you said, those are political issues that are very complicated. But what's not complicated is how one person treats another person. And if those Border Patrol agents were feeling overwhelmed, then they could fall back, call for backup, do something else. There's not
Regroup.
regroup. What is it? Where is it in the playbook that if someone gets close enough to your horse, charge them or grab your reins and use it as a whip? It just it I feel like for those individuals, either by lack of training or lack of understanding or whatever it might be, prejudice, they have just regressed and gone from 2021 to some, as you said, much darker period in our history. And it's so discouraging.
It is. It's like you said, we were, and I don't want to lump everything that may have happened progressively since the new administration has come in, and God knows they have a lot to sort of dig us out of,
Yeah.
and a lot of that's going to be painful to do. And so certainly I'm not saying that there's been an easy road, but I was like you hoping that um, that we would see a lot more of a conscious effort to see people as people.
Yeah.
And I think part of what made this okay to some people, uh, maybe in a panic or in a heat of some sort of passion, like you said, feeling overwhelmed or what have you, what made that be okay is your latent feeling about people of another race or from
Yeah.
another country or whatever, as opposed to connecting on a basic human level. And again, when I have these discussions with people, it is the pushback I often get is that I'm saying you should just let whosoever will in, um, whether they have, bad intentions for America or not, and all that. And that's the furthest thing from what I'm saying. I like I said, I know that immigration and keeping everybody safe and all of that is a very complex and very necessary issue. So I'm not even saying that every one of the 15,000 people under that bridge should get into the country and stay and
Right.
and do whatever. I know that there are costs to that. I mean, it's a very complex issue. I guess what I'm saying is surely there are systems in place or systems that can be put in place. We're a very smart country theoretically, uh, that can be put in place to deal with such issues in a way that is a lot more humane than
Yeah.
chasing people down on horseback. And like I said, I made the kind of joke earlier about pulling out the horses for just such an occasion. I don't um, realistically think that I'm sure they're using horses daily, like you said, to cover some of that terrain and what have you.
Yeah.
I'm just saying those images are are very want to get away, type images. Like you see yourself,
Yeah.
whipping some people as you say, maybe that wasn't the best idea. But I guess I'm saying just how easy, what's disturbing is how easy we go to that,
Yeah.
that is, how easy it is for that to be okay. And that is a real concern. So now there's an investigation into it. Now it gets more complicated and more deep. Now we get more polarized in this country with regard to people making it all right to treat people that way because of who these people are and where they're coming from. And we'll say everything about them except the color of their skin.
Yeah.
But on the images, that's an undeniable, sort of truth. So I don't know. It made me sad. It made me hurt. Um, and I'm still got my fingers crossed and holding out hope for things to keep progressing and getting better. But
Yeah.
I guess it's proof that that's going to be continue to be, I should say, sort of incremental. We didn't get this way overnight, so we gotta, incrementally get out
Well,
of
and
it.
that's so key. I mean, we didn't get this way overnight. It's not going to get fixed overnight. You're absolutely right that the current administration is, I mean, to say that it's better than the previous administration, at least in my opinion, is a dramatic understatement. It is a different species altogether
Absolutely.
than Trump. And there's a lot of residual nastiness and including racism that Trump left in his wake that he fomented and that is still percolating. Um, so something clearly needs to be done about all of those sort of ripple effects, including what's going on at the border, right? I mean, it was Trump's policy to enable ICE to deport whoever they wanted to under the umbrella of, well, it's a pandemic, so
Mm-hmm.
we're not going to process them like we normally would. They can't ask for asylum. They just have to go home,
Mm-hmm.
or back across to the other side of the border, not even home. And, you know, obviously, the Biden Harris administration has to look at that and decide whether they want to keep that policy, change that policy. And I can only imagine how hard Kamala Harris and her team are working. And I do understand that the border agents are overworked and understaffed, and all of that is true. And it doesn't take away from the overt racism of what we saw in those images.
Mm-hmm.
And if
Mm-hmm.
if people actually dig, they will find not just the still images, but some video that was taken. Maybe the still image is a capture from that video, but one of the agents on horseback is screaming at one of the Haitian men who's in the water, or
Mm-hmm.
no, just on shore, and criticizing him for having the women in the group he was with carry presumably food or whatever else they had. It's not a lot, so I'm guessing it's whatever
Mm-hmm.
necessities, and clearly there were some bags of food. He's yelling, is that the way you treat your women? If that's the way
Mm-hmm.
you treat your women, no wonder your country is shit. And
Mm-hmm.
several things struck me about that. One is your women. I mean,
Right. Right.
he he he's just a hair's breadth away from saying the N word, or
Yeah.
black
You
people, or
people.
but like
Mm-hmm.
your women.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many bizarre things about that. um this notion of possession, or that
Mm-hmm.
those women, those black women, are different from our white women.
Right.
So if that's the way you treat
Right.
your women,
Right. Right.
no. And for him to say that's why your country is shit is
Mm-hmm.
so ignorant. you
Mm-hmm.
know Haiti has been through two earthquakes in the last few years, as you were saying before the show, presidential assassination, which is just emblematic of the political chaos in that country. It's the most
Right.
impoverished country in the Western Hemisphere. And, you know, basically, we have you know, colonization of that
Mm,
country by
mhm.
France and other European countries to thank for what is currently an absolute disaster. It's not something
Right.
that, you know, the Haitian people didn't ask for earthquakes and assassinations, and they definitely did not ask to, you know, have the country colonized. And it just, it's a giant mess for which they are not responsible. And rather than are feeling a sense of responsibility, when somebody says "your women,"
Mhm.
it's so distancing. It's not you and I are brothers, you and I are sisters, you and I are both humans. Like, and I'm sure what didn't make the
The video.
the news coverage is like, who were the people who brought 150 porta potties and are
Mhm.
being paid $7.25 an hour? And who are the people who brought water? And there were probably so many people of all different races and ethnicities who are extending kindness to these
Right.
refugees. And like you said, we can't take some of these images and extrapolate, well, this is representative of all of humanity, right? But
Sure.
boy, it's problematic that that still exists, that somebody doesn't see another person suffering and say, you know, you gotta set aside where you're from, what you did, what color you are, and you're thirsty, I'll give you some water, we'll sort this out. And
Right.
it's,
That's what I was
but
going to say. I have to even do what I have to do. I have to
yeah,
do my job. And part of that job may be, sadly, to send you back to Haiti. However, I do not have to demean you, beat you,
yeah,
run you down, and everything else in order to do that. I do
yeah,
not have to demean you and the country you come from and everything else in order to do,
yeah.
you know, my job as far as that goes. And we used to, now I really sound like, you know, my grandfather used to sound, but we
That's
used to
good. All
as a
right,
country. Yeah.
channeling your grandfather.
Channeling grandpa. Yeah. Yeah. We used to be as a country a lot better about being the place that people wanted to be like,
Yeah,
for good, bad, or indifferent. I'm not saying that
yeah,
we've talked about that, what America's history was like.
yeah,
But I am saying um, there was a certain pride in us being the thing that people said, hey, well, you know, this is would be, you know, the standard or whatever, to whatever degree, um, at least in the sense of an ideal.
yeah.
But I mean, if people are running from where they're coming from, thinking they're coming to a better place in America, and they get here and this is what they hear and what they see and experience, you know, I mean,
It's horrifying, and people don't even realize, those same, what appear to me to be racist border patrol agents, and maybe that's 2 of 20, maybe
right.
that's representative of the whole group, maybe not. But what was really interesting as I was looking at news reports before the show, the MSNBC video and story that goes along with it, 200,000 views. um the Fox one, similar story, similar number of views.
Mm-hmm.
But who's got like twice as many, 500,000 views, is
Mm-hmm.
Al Jazeera. And
Really?
they are,
Mm-hmm.
to your point, I think, I'm just guessing here, but eating this up, they, meaning the audience of Al Jazeera, who's largely Muslim audience, is saying, you know America touts itself as
Mm-hmm.
land of the free, home of the brave. Look at this, you know, look at these people being treated like slaves.
Mm-hmm.
Look at how cowardly these men on horseback are behaving. How
Mm-hmm.
does that align with some, values that we're touting, right? And those values are there somewhere when we just have to, you know, work harder to come together as a country, because we there the parts of our citizenry that are making headlines in other countries, with people who many of whom begin with a critique of the United States and our values, now have a lot more salient data. And it's um making it harder to bridge the gap between, let's say, the you know I'm painting with a very broad brush, but the Western world and the Middle Eastern world, or uh, Christians
The
and
U.S.
Jews
and
and
anybody.
Muslims, and the US and anybody. Thank you. So it's just, we are doing ourselves such a disservice when we are ignoring other people's humanity.
No doubt. And this goes back to in some of the training that you and I have done, that status for non-negotiable rules, whenever you uh well, just for the listeners, and the watchers, the viewers, if you will, the four non-negotiable rules of status, or whenever you lower someone or something status, you lower your own in the eyes of others. Whenever you raise someone or something status, you raise your own in the eyes of others. Whenever you raise someone's status, you not only raise your own, but the status of who you represent. In this case, would be the U.S. or the Border Patrol or what have you. And then the other one is growth can only occur when all parties are operating on an equal high status level. So if you're talking about relations with not only Middle Eastern countries that we want to be allies with, or that we're trying to create new or repair relationships that may have
Yeah.
been damaged
Yeah.
or whatever. That's made more difficult by the fact that watching us lower these people's status lowers our status in the eyes of the world in that way. And it's just, people looking for something that they can, get on you about or complain about or use, like you say, as an argument to hate you or to stir hate for you worldwide. Then you're just giving them, more that fodder. But I think too, um, and I can't lay all this at the feet of the past administration in the sense that says that all divisiveness and racism started when Donald Trump, for instance, got
Right.
elected.
Right.
That would be convenient, but that's not the truth. And I
Right.
think what that administration and these past 4 years have done and shown is that it made certain things okay.
Yeah.
It made dealing with people in that way and saying these things and whatever okay. And then when you say something about it, it's like, no, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying the N word, but I'm not
Right.
saying, you know what I mean? So it's that double talk, but it is, there's a marked difference now between what we call our separate groups all the time, and so that it's going to be difficult, and it's been proven to be a little difficult, even though we're better to come back together with this. But whenever, this is what I'm thinking about some of these images, whenever a situation presents itself that allows you to default to divisive thinking, people are coming from another country. Those people coming from another country are of a different, skin color than mine. That allows you, if you're not doing the work, to default to a separate, I'm better than you,
Right.
your
Right.
country is shit, blah, blah, blah type mentality. And then that's when that ugliness comes out. And before you know it, now you're in an image on a horse whipping a man as he runs for his life. And if you'd ask that person, maybe, I don't know, people one way or the other, so they could plus or minus be from the best to the worst. But theoretically, if you ask a person a week or so before that image, would this ever be used? No, there's no way that would be me. I treat everybody, like this, and this. Meanwhile, they're the person who says, well, we don't let N-words in the house. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that kind of thing exists. And I think, like I said, some of what we've been through recently has given license to everybody picking a side instead of
Yeah.
the side of unity and humanity, and that's sad.
Yeah. And your framework of status has really helped me understand both the causes and the solutions of prejudice and or
Mm-hmm.
causes of solutions for. And I think it's a really accessible way to think about that division and
Mm-hmm.
divisiveness in general. As soon as you other somebody, you have lowered their status, and it makes it easier for some people. It gives them license to treat somebody not just as a second class citizen, but as we saw in those images, violently
Mm-hmm.
and inhumanely. And you're right. There has been, uh, there have been racial tensions. The Old Testament is full of examples,
Mm-hmm.
different tribes fighting and using as justification for, you know, genocide, the fact that this group thinks differently, or this group
Mm-hmm.
looks different, or this group has different practices, or they worship a different god, or they worship a bunch of gods, and that's a problem. They should just, worship one. And it's like we have said many times in this episode and before, these are complicated issues, but it's the context that's complicated, the individual interactions. And this is where your framework has really helped my thinking, because I get overwhelmed when I think about
Mm-hmm.
how is Chris Thurber going to create political change in the United States. I can't even create political change in the little old town of Exeter, New Hampshire, so
Mm-hmm.
it's just, I'm not a politician and not cut out for that. I'm more of a one-on-one person, which is why I love doing our show. It's why I like being a
Right.
psychologist. It's why I'm really happy writing, because that's one-on-one, like that's me in my own voice, it's just,
Right.
and
Right.
I think it's the same like for you for screenwriting. And I feel like anyone who's wondering what the heck do we do about this can think about your framework of status and ask themselves, what are they doing intentionally or unintentionally, but still within their awareness, that others somebody else? And
Mm-hmm.
boy, how does that change the world? It's just, I I know that lots of factors change and influence people's behavior, their economic conditions, job stress, family discord.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not taking anything away from how challenging just the day to day is for a lot of people. And yet there keeps being this constant transcendent factor of how one human being treats another human being, that, boy, if we were able to reduce it to that in our
Mm-hmm.
own minds more frequently, so many of
It
these
gets
other
a lot more
problems.
simple.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because you know what? Here's cynical Chris coming out. Somebody is going to, fly down to Texas. A few people are going to lose their jobs. Everybody else is going to get a 2-hour diversity training that's infinitely
Right.
forgettable, and then they're back at it.
Right. Right. Right.
What the hell?
Right. They're back in the saddle again, if you
Back in the
will.
saddle. It's so I
Mm.
just right. I hope something better than that happens, but I just
But
you know,
that's easier to do, to check that box off, and
exactly.
that's the, you know what, and that it's still the same thing, but it touches on something else. A lot of the training that you and I have done with regard to diversity, um, with organizations, and some of the other training I've done regarding personal leadership and what have you with my brother, and some other things. It's really interesting how people who bring us to do the training approach it.
Mm. Say more about that.
They approach it in a way that is checking off a box.
Mm-hmm.
So you say, well, here, a lot of this diversity stuff is going around, and we want to be able to say that we've addressed it. Like when you say, I got enough hand sanitizer to say we're COVID safe. You know,
Right.
but my behavior in general, my lifestyle for it has not changed.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? So,
Yeah.
so in other words, I think that, like what you said, cynical, Chris's take on what's going to happen is pretty accurate, and it's pretty accurate because it's easier, especially from an administrative standpoint, to do that and say, boom, we check the boxes off. Here's what we did to address the problem. Problem solved. When election year comes, I can say we did that. I can point at the screen with
Right.
this and say that this is what we did. Meanwhile, though, you have not changed or dealt with trying to change the hearts and minds
Yeah.
of people. And that, I think, the hardest thing about any of that, about altering any of it, is the work that people have to constantly do. So like what we were just talking about, what you were saying with regard to it coming down to, how do I treat Chris? How does Chris treat me? Like, how do we together make sure we maintain the garden that is our relationship?
Yeah.
And I heard my brother say, and I stole it from him and try to pass it off as my own, but there's no such thing as a maintenance free garden. So you always have to do the work in whatever it
Yeah.
is. If you're trying to stay fit, you know, you got to do
Yeah.
the work. If you're trying to eat healthy and be healthy, it's a lifestyle change as opposed to, you know, a 2 week diet. So if we're
Right.
talking about interpersonal relationships and how we treat people, that is a constant work in progress. And what you see oftentimes is an erosion based on laziness, you know, when it comes
Oh
to
yeah.
doing that work. So now it's easier for me to just say, yeah, well, I took some diversity training, but I'm gonna still fall back on this thing that says, you know, these people are like this, or women are like that, or, you know,
Yeah.
whatever. And now I can easily deal with that, and that becomes over time a cemented sort of wall of thinking that
Right.
now I'm sort of imprisoned behind. And now when I can put on the fake face until I'm faced with something that you do that makes me then say, well, see, that's how you treat your women. So, you know
Right.
what I mean? Blah, blah, blah. And so now here we are. And you go, oh, and it's usually when you got 15,000 people running for the border and it's 24 of you on horses. When it's usually when you're in a press situation that the real you comes out,
Yeah.
and you go, oh shucks, you know, this is, you know, not who I thought I would be, but this is who I am. So I'm just saying that to say to anybody under the sound of my voice that constant work on those simple, who am I, human to human principles, will help guide you, even if you got to do something as uncomfortable as sending somebody back to a country that's, you know, you might think is not even a good place for them to go, but
Yeah.
policy says one thing, but how you deal with people should be another, you know, policy altogether.
And that's the thing. Like when I hear your explanation there, I'm thinking um, about the distinction between learning something and being something.
Mm-hmm.
I I don't think that diversity is a thing for these border agents, not to pick on them. You know, this is for all of us.
Sure.
I don't think that that's, diversity, equity, inclusion, social justice. It's just not something to learn where you
Mm-hmm.
go like, okay, I learned, how to balance this equation, or I learned this list of French vocabulary.
Mm-hmm.
It is like your brother saying, it is a, it is something you do to fertilize your garden, and that
Mm-hmm.
is in need of constant maintenance, as you said. And I love the metaphor of relationship as a garden. And I think, if I were Kamala Harris, I would say, okay, here's what we're going to do. First of all, we have 15,000 people who need food and water, and we're not exactly sure where they're going, but they need toilets, they need food, they need water, they need shelter. We need to get physicians down there. We need to get, uh, we need books for the kids. We need,
Mm-hmm.
like, and there are lots and lots of people who would donate their time and their material possessions to make life easier for those 15,000 people, at least for a couple of weeks, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I would say to all these Border Patrol folks who I understand understaffed, underpaid, stretched thin,
Overwhelmed.
overwhelmed, I would say, we are giving you a stipend because you are all going to host one of these Haitian families in your home for these 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And those people are going to feel like they won the lottery because the other, 14,900 people are still going to be under the bridge. But this is an experience that is going to fertilize that garden, is going to create a
Mm-hmm.
relationship. And I would say, that's it. So when I say stipend, I'm talking about a few $1,000s for the extra groceries and necessities and, clothes, whatever. If you live in a small house, and 4 extra people is really going to strap. Think we're also, it's Southern Texas. But we're giving you a, 6-person tent. We're not saying you're going to build a house but you're going to live with these people.
Mm-hmm.
And
And
at the
learn
end of 2 weeks,
just dealing with
we don't need to do a
humanity.
debrief. You don't need to fill out a questionnaire. Uh, but that's going to change. Maybe 2 weeks is not enough. Maybe it's 4 weeks, but it's not a very long time. But that's going to change who they are in the way that you're suggesting. It's going to affect their hearts. It's going to establish a relationship that is no longer othering. And, suddenly, and I would, get all those Border Patrol agents and the refugees together after there have been this, 2 to 4 week homestay. And I would say, all right, now y'all have a day to come up with the basics of a plan for what we need to do with these 15,000 people that are still under the bridge. And we're asking you because you represent the two sides of this issue. And who
Mm-hmm.
knows what they'll come up with. But I I guarantee that that's the last time any of those Border Patrol agents are going to be physically aggressive with people crossing the border, because they're gonna think these are
I
human
think
beings.
there's a good. I mean, it would be more complicated, of course, but that would be. But the principle of saying some kind of exercise that shows that these people are human beings,
Yeah,
and on both sides,
yeah,
that you're able to look at the border patrol agents as human beings, and they're able to look
right,
at you as a refugee as a human being,
right,
and that human common ground gets found.
yeah,
uh, I think is a very, very good exercise. But I'm saying, so that's something that's idealistic,
yeah,
and and
See how
everything,
quickly I
because
went from cynical Chris to idealistic Chris?
that's amazing. That's amazing. People are
You
dynamic,
have that
and
effect on me. You have that effect
none
on me.
more than Chris Thurber, Dr. Chris Thurber. But I'm saying that to say it's a great idea about what we can do, just human to human.
Yeah.
And I think it is a good exercise for people to identify somebody that you may not be as warm
Yeah.
towards. And there didn't have to be anybody from a different race or culture
Right.
necessarily. But I'm just saying, just in general, somebody that um, that I don't know, that's not your, you would consider, I wouldn't say like a straight arch enemy or anything. We don't want anybody to kill each other, but I am saying somebody where this would be a challenge for you to
Yeah.
find some ways to see the humanity in them, and hopefully foster them seeing the humanity in you, and see if that relationship has room to improve. So, in other words, you all would start treating each other like you're saying with the refugee and the border patrol family. They each would come in and theoretically learn to treat each other with equal high status. And when they do, you would start seeing that relationship grow.
Yeah.
And but I think that in lieu of being able to get Vice President Harris on the phone and saying, "Hey, here's an idea. Well, you going to try this?" She said, "Hey, Dr. Thurber, that's an excellent idea. Let me run with that." In lieu of that, I would just sort of encourage anybody listening to us to maybe do that in your own life and just
Yeah.
see what that's like. Because and here's the thing: everybody brings something to the table. Even people you think are from a crap country that let their women carry the stuff. You don't know what the reasoning is behind that. Maybe they have a family unit where they're all together like that. And if he's been carrying it for X amount of miles and she then picks up the thing and they join it, that maybe that's how, you don't know.
Yeah.
But you can learn that without making those assumptions. When you start treating everybody with equal high status, you will also find that they may be bringing some things to the table that you can learn, that's not just a cultural difference, but that's a human difference. That's something that you're not necessarily good at, but that they're good at. And I'm not as good at math as I am at writing, but I can help you with your paper if you help me with my math homework.
Right.
What I mean? Whatever that is. And then together we can both improve our grades. So that's just a way to think about human interactions, um, without focusing just on whatever the differences are and thinking that those differences automatically mean you're deficient.
Yeah.
So
And I think, in case anyone who's listening or watching thinks I'm being sanctimonious or something, I, would be the first one to admit that I've made plenty of missteps and judged people or othered people or objectified people unknowingly. And when someone points it out to me, it feels awful. And I've learned that in those moments, it can be easy to get defensive. But if you have a bit of humility, you open up the possibility of learning so much more. And I'll give you a recent example from 6 years ago, when I had the good fortune of a one-term sabbatical. My family and I went to Australia, and being someone who works with a lot of independent schools, I visited a number of independent schools between Adelaide in southern Australia all the way up to Cairns and even further north in northeastern Australia, and visited one school, absolutely wonderful school, called St. Bernard's. And um, they serve a lot of Indigenous kids and kids from the Torres Strait Islands. And we arrived very late at night in our camper van, were greeted by the headmaster, and pretty much went to sleep. The next morning, um, he sort of knocked on the camper van and said, good morning, and please join us in the cafeteria for breakfast. So we got ready, went up 5 minutes later, and my boys and my wife and I were some of the only white people
Mm.
in the school. A lot of the teachers are indigenous. Um, we weren't a total novelty. There were some white kids who live locally. There were some white teachers. Um, but I was instantly aware of feeling in a sudden minority in that
Mm.
regard, right? Sort of like working at a boys' camp when I go to do a staff training at a girls' camp, and
Mm.
so the like maintenance guy and I, who are the two men on the
Right.
property, you notice it. Anyway, that wasn't the thing, but I um, was fascinated by the fact that most people in Australia love Vegemite, and they're making these, sandwiches or putting on toast this very salty, this like solid soy sauce kind of thing. And I um, would much rather have butter or Nutella or something like that. And so I took out my cell phone and wanted to take a picture of these kids who were all, you know, preparing their toast with Vegemite, and they were really shying away. It was clear they didn't want their
Mm.
picture taken. So I put my phone away, and I thought, oh, I didn't. This is the biased part revealed. My thought was, um, these indigenous kids are really shy.
Mm.
And later in the day, I mentioned that to the headmaster, and he said, "Oh, wow, you know,
Mm.
you don't, nobody's told you." And I said, "Told me what?" Um,
Mm.
and he said, one of their cultural beliefs is that if someone takes your photograph, it it can capture a piece of your soul in a way
Mm.
that's uncomfortable and not like accepted in that culture. So you'll meet some indigenous kids and adults who are fine having their pictures taken, and others who would just rather not. And in case, again, anyone listening is like, well, that's bizarre.
Mm.
Who would think that getting your picture taken would, that would take a piece of
Right.
your soul? But just about everybody listening has at some point, when someone next to them sneezes, said, "Bless you." Why do we say
Mm.
that? Because there used to be a belief, and maybe some people still believe it, that the sneeze was an indication that your soul had departed your body for a second, or the devil had nipped at your soul and tried to pull it away for a second. And so that was why the person next to you would offer a blessing. Like,
Mm.
we do it as a matter of
Mm.
course, just like a lot of these kids would rather not have their picture taken as a
Mhm.
matter of course. And and again, my thought was they're shy or something. I knew they'd seen cameras and cell phones before, but
Sure.
it was just
Yeah.
it was just one of those moments where I thought, come on, Thurber, you're better than that. You know,
Mm.
you didn't even bother to ask. You jumped to a conclusion. Um, and it was just, I don't know. I was upset at myself for being insensitive in the first place, but more, I was upset at myself for just making a weird judgment. That was very othering. And of course, by the end of our stay at St. Bernard's, we had made lots of friends, and we had brought some frisbees
Mm.
that my boys were teaching the kids how to play ultimate frisbee, and they absolutely
Mhm.
loved it. And it was just, and I'm still in correspondence with that school. I am glad that somebody pointed out to me that I was wrong. I'm glad
Mhm.
that I just by a tiny fraction increased my understanding of another culture, but mostly I learned this lesson that you're talking about of waiting to, form an opinion until after you've begun cultivating a relationship, you know?
Exactly.
And so that's what I hope people do. And yeah, go out to lunch with that person that is, works with you that you aren't particularly fond of, and find out their story. And I don't
Mhm.
know. It's
And just try to see, like some of the value in them. If you don't like them, you're obviously clear on the shortcomings, and they're probably clear on yours. But
yeah,
what you're probably more ignorant to is, the things that they bring to the table that are,
yeah,
more valuable,
yeah,
and that you can learn from. I'll be the
yeah.
first to say there's people that I initially or knee jerk in my life have said, yeah, okay, whatever, that guy. But then later, uh, come to realize that there was something that I could learn from them. And so,
Do you think
I
that's what
like
your
to think that I've
grandfather?
done that too.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, no, I was just saying I like to think that I've been able to do that going the other way. But I
Yeah.
know that people have done that for me. What were you saying about my
I was just going
grandfather?
to ask whether your grandfather would say that is one of the main differences. Like you were saying, your grandfathers were just not good at uh, sort of recognizing one another's humanity. Do you think he would have said that it's because we're not taking the time that previous generation used to take, and not like to romanticize a generation ago or two generations ago, lots of problems in and everywhere, but would he attribute some of the change to somehow we are not in more recent days taking the time to get to know people, or giving them, asking, like you said, what does this person bring to the table? Are we snapping to judgment faster than we used to?
I mean, I think the answer would probably be yes and no. I think that given how things moved and how things were just when I was younger, I mean, I feel older than I am. Sometimes I think about when I was younger, uh, how things moved as opposed to how fast they move now due to computers, cell phones, all of that kind of thing. The fact that I used to have to do uh, a paper or research paper by studying the encyclopedia or looking up books with the Dewey Decimal System in the library if it was open, and until it got ready to close, where now I can be on the computer 24 hours a day and Google all sorts of abstracts and different facts and things just on my phone. Even at a moment's notice, I tell the kids there's no reason to be ignorant in 2021. So I think just the sheer amount of available information makes us more snap to judgment
Mm-hmm.
now than before. But to be fair, given the time that it was and what was available to us at the time, I would say that some of how we dealt was relatively um, the same. I this part I will speak for my experience as a black person. I don't know what it would have been like to be white and do this, but where I came from and grew up, especially before I got bused to a school that was predominantly white, there were people I didn't like and didn't get along with, but what we had was a sort of shared, and it sounds dramatic to say oppression, even though it's sort of accurate. Um, but what we had was a sort of shared story with regard to that. So certain people got cut some slack because of that, I think. So even though there were people that I didn't, really rock with or whatever, um, if they were from my neighborhood and we were from the same area, they got cut a little slack, where some of that's different now. Like now I know a few of my neighbors and I wave at people when I'm walking through the neighborhood, walking my dog or whatever, but I don't know them on the level that I knew people growing up as a kid.
Yeah.
In my neighborhood, I knew the kids, the grown people coming home. We talk about this sometime, my brothers and I, but I used to catch the bus to school when I was getting bused, 8 blocks from my house. But nobody had to walk me to the bus stop or drive me to the bus stop. And the reason for that was because my grandmother and my mother would know every step I made, just about from the bus stop to my house in that neighborhood, because they had a network of other mothers and grandmothers who was around there
Yeah.
and so by the time I got home, they would be telling me, oh, so you stopped at the such and such, the corner store, you know what I mean? Wait, well, y'all following me? What I got, just before
So
GPS, you
the
didn't have
mother
Find My
grandmother
iPhone.
spy network.
Man, I'm trying to tell you, it was
Yeah.
deep. They were better than the CIA. But my point is, there was more of a sense of that. They knew me, I knew them.
Yeah.
I was reminiscing in my mind the other day about a neighbor that I had. He used to have us laughing, sitting on the porch, eating and talking and whatever. Everybody just they kind of looked out for you, in that way. My relationship with my neighbors is not that same way now, because everybody's kind of more siloed, and we kind of deal with each other a little bit different.
Yeah.
And I will say, now this is the funny part, in this same neighborhood where people wave at me and do whatever, when I have tried to although I had all the paperwork together, shoot some of the modules for educational things and whatever,
Yeah.
some people would come up to me and say, do you live in this neighborhood? Because they see me and my black crew
Right.
with people. So I'm just saying, these are it's the same people though, who when they see me with my
Right.
dog, they're like, hey, how you doing? Whatever. But they see me with a camera. It's like, wait a minute, I'm gonna call the police. So I'm just saying,
Yeah.
it's definitely not the same thing. And I think some of that is because of we're quicker to stereotype and to jump into some of these things. Like I said, I think especially in the last 4 to 6 years,
Yeah.
a lot of things have been more pronounced like that, because it's like people finally felt like they got to say, oh, okay, I get to say the most racist stuff I want to say for years. I can now say it because it's okay, and it's not okay. So
Yeah.
I don't know, but I
Well,
think if we backed up a little bit and took some of that time, we would do better.
I agree with you, and I know we need to wrap up in a minute, but I feel like that's another great topic for us to discuss. Is given the glut of emails and texts and information, some of which it's a blessing that if you want to do research at 3 a.m, you can get online. It's also forcing us to process information more quickly and therefore less thoughtfully, with not great consequences. And that would be an interesting thing to talk about.
I think so.
Yeah. But everything that you've said in this hour has just made me think there's no substitute for, face-to-face interaction, which we all felt, starved of during quarantine. But it's not just that it's amusing or comforting or fun. It's also a way to get to that place where you're holding yourself and another person in equally high status and moving that relationship forward and tending to that garden that takes time. It can't be
Yeah.
rushed.
And it takes constant work. And I think if you
Yeah.
do it as a lifestyle change, it becomes easier. It's one of those things you look up and you say, oh man, this has happened, or this has been the evolution, as opposed to trying to make it, immediate and like that. Like I said, I just think that that's something we ought to, if there's a takeaway from this episode, to me, that would be it, is to start doing that work, on
Yeah,
yourself and on
indeed.
your relationships. Yeah. Hey man, it's great talking with you as always.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that we're getting back at it for
Me
season
too.
2. And that we'll be, putting more of these shows out, talking about some great topics. We got some interesting things coming up, and so I'm excited to delve into those with you.
Looking forward to it.
All right, my friend. Well, until next time, everybody take care of yourself and each other, and do the work. Do the work.
Do the work. Thanks,
All
David.
right. There, thank you. Thank you for listening to I'm Black, You're White, Now What?
You can find more episodes on the podcast channel Teaching What It Takes, available on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and Spotify.
To learn more about the work I do, visit www.preparingthepath.com.
And to learn more about the work I do, visit drchristhurber.com.